I, male 29, and my wife, female 30, have two kids, male 5, 3M. My wife works a full-time office job while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. My sister, 26F, let's call her Barb, and her husband, 30M, let's call him Nick, live nearby and work full-time jobs. They have a daughter, 5F, let's call her Tracy. Because of my comfortable work schedule, when our kids started going to daycare, we decided that I would be dropping off and picking up my niece from daycare alongside my own kids. I didn't mind and thought it was great for my kids to spend time with their cousin. I get along with Tracy and always thought I was her cool uncle. She's a sweet kid and usually well-behaved. Most days, I bring her and my kids back to our house, make them snacks or dinner, and in the afternoon evening, my sister comes to pick them up. A few days ago, the 5-year-old kids were watching Bluey on the TV as I was preparing snacks with my 3-year-old. And I suddenly heard yelling. I rushed over to see what was up, and my son was yelling at her that my dad's not a girl, while my niece yelled back, "He is. He's a FT. That's like a girl." I was kind of in shock at first, but I turned off the TV, sat her down, and explained that this is a very bad word and we shouldn't be calling people that, and that regardless, I'm not a girl. I told her she should apologize to me because we don't act mean to each other in this family. And if I hear this again, I'm going to talk to her parents and she's going to get in trouble. She said she wouldn't get in trouble because that's what her dad called me and he's not in trouble. I was stunned. I told her that regardless of what her dad said, it's a very bad word and she's not to use it with me or in my presence and that she should apologize regardless because it hurt my feelings. Which she did, because she's a really good kid. We talked some more, and I prodded her about other things her parents said. From what I gather, Nick, my brother-in-law, told my sister in Tracy's presence that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare, that cooking is a woman's duty, as is cleaning, and really most of the things I do around my house, and that I'm a girl because I do housework and my wife earns more money than me. I explained to her the best I could that men and women could work from an office or from home, and that my wife or Barb working long hours from the office doesn't make them men, and vice versa. But I didn't dwell on it with her, since it's not really her fault. I didn't immediately bring it up with my sister, because I figured it would be a difficult conversation, and I didn't want to have it in front of the kids. I wanted to talk it out with my wife first as well. I did talk to my wife that evening, and she seemed really upset as well. I told her that I think I should demand an apology from Nick and my sister, and she agreed. I called my sister and told her what happened, and she said that it's just a word and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and obviously Nick doesn't dislike me. I said I don't care whether he does or doesn't dislike me. He is talking shoot about me behind my back to my niece and to her, and she is apparently very chill about this, rather than standing up for me. She said that was how Nick was, and I should stop being a drama queen. I told her to frick off, and if that was how she felt, she could pick up her own child from daycare, and hung up. I know it was really short notice and rude, but I really felt like I was being disrespected by people I did so much for over the years and were my family. My wife said she understood, and that I shouldn't back down until I at least get a proper apology. The next 2 days were a weekend, and there was no daycare. I assumed there would be calls or texts from Barb, but there was nothing. In fact, the suspicious lack of any messages or calls made me think she didn't take my words seriously, and this actually got me even more angry. The calls did come when it was time to pick up Tracy for daycare, and I, obviously, didn't come. I dropped my own kids off and didn't even answer for a while. I know it was petty, but I was stewing for 2 days and figured letting Barb stew for a few hours seemed really appropriate and felt really good. Around noon when she called again, I did pick up. I was going to smugly tell her that I was ready for my apology and we would put it behind us, but I didn't get to. Instead, she went off on me about how I was irresponsible and I flaked, and she was so late for work because of me, to which I just said, "I told you I wasn't going to pick her up. You had 2 days to make arrangements." And she kept yelling at me, so I hung up again. She kept calling and sending me texts about picking Tracy up from daycare, to which I said I will not be, then stopped replying. When I came to pick my kids up, Tracy was expecting me to take her as well, and I didn't, which was very rough on me and her both. Like, I know it's not her fault, and she's 5, and she suddenly doesn't get to go over to our place and play and have snacks, but at the same time, I didn't want to just let this thing go. I felt like I deserved an apology, and still do. So I explained that me and her mom were fighting, but I'll pick her up again when we work it out. She obviously didn't take it well because she's 5, but I apologized, took my kids, and left. Well, a bit later, I got a call from my mom. Barb roped her into picking up Tracy, but my mom is disabled, so she was having a really hard time with Tracy and asked me why I was being mean to Barb. I told her everything, expecting her to take my side, but instead she also pulled a, "You know how Nick is," to which I replied that the more I realize how Nick is, the less I like it. And if he thinks all this shoot in general and about me specifically, I sure as frick ain't gonna be doing free labor for him. She said I was blowing this all out of proportion, and I told her I wasn't the one doing it, because all I asked for was a freaking apology, and everyone else seemed to prefer all of this shoot to just giving it to me, to which she said I should just be the bigger man and not let it get to me, to which I said I was done and to have fun with Tracy. That evening, I got a call from Nick himself, which I was hesitant about, but chose to answer on the off chance that I was actually about to get that apology. Nope. Apparently, my behavior is causing Barb great distress, and we're family, and how can I do this to my own sister? I told him that since we're family, how can he talk shoot about me to his kid, which I take care of daily, and he said he was only joking and it was all in good fun. I told him it was neither good nor fun for me, and I want my apology. He blew up on me, telling me I was a FT and couldn't take a joke, and called me a hysterical little girl. I told him to frick off and that I was done with him and hung up. This led to a bunch of calls from Barb and my mom, which I didn't answer. Barb texted me that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price for me being petty. And I told her that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price of her parents being ungrateful pieces of shoot, to which she just yelled at me a bunch about how she was going to lose her job and I was being cruel to her and to Mom. I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology, I would be blocking her number. And it wasn't. So now I blocked her. The past few days, my mom's been picking up Tracy, and it's been really rough seeing her in daycare and explaining that Grandma's going to pick her up, which she hates, and tells me she isn't having fun with Grandma and wants to come over to our place, and it's breaking my heart. But at the same time, I never got a single apology from anyone but the 5-year-old, and I feel like letting this go would just be telling my family that it's okay to ignore my boundaries. But at the same time, I do love my niece, and I don't want to traumatize her or have her resent me. She is a good kid, and none of it is her fault. So, am I the idiot? And what do I do? Now for a few important comments. When asked if he should cut off contact with his niece, but have serious talks with Nick and Barb about their language use toward family, he replied, "I really hope to do that. How do I go about it, though? Do I keep picking her up, but go no contact with the rest of them at all other times? I genuinely don't want to take it out on her, but how do I stand up for myself without doing that?" When asked why his 5-year-old kid is not in school yet, he explained, "They will be starting school next year. My kid turned 5 recently and wasn't eligible yet, and they decided to hold off on Tracy so that they could go together." When asked if his wife and other adults know about Nick's behaviors, he said, "You're not wrong. This isn't the first time we butted heads. The other instances were just resolved, I thought. Like when he first started showing up for family holiday meals, he'd just sit with my dad and watch football, soccer, or whatever, while I was playing host or minding the kids, and not get up to clear the dishes even when my dad did, so I called him out on it a few times, and he does it now, which is why I thought, yeah, he probably wasn't really taught any better, but he could change. But then again, he would also leave terrible tips for waiting staff. But on that, I assumed that had to do with his financial situation, So my wife and I started to just pick up the tab because we can afford it and don't really mind. And we'd be paying for my parents anyway, since my mom doesn't work anymore. So I don't know. He was never my favorite guy, but he seemed to make my sister happy. She had a few terrible relationships before him, so I would pick my battles. He never told me anything as overtly sexist homophobic as that, so I just figured he was just not my type of guy, but didn't really confront him unless I felt it was warranted. I certainly wouldn't let slurs slide, but I don't recall him really using any in my presence before. And he doesn't really spend any time with my kids anyway, so I was never too worried about his presence around them. As for my sister, she is my sister, and we used to be very close. Hell, before this shoot, I thought we still were close. But now that I think about it, I think she kind of became more withdrawn these past few years, because we used to talk about everything, especially around my mom's diagnosis. She has multiple sclerosis, and her being so willing to overlook someone talking like that about me actually caught me totally by surprise. Still, I don't know if I want to cut her off completely, but also, obviously, I can't just ignore her excusing Nick's behavior. When responding to comments on how he chose to work from home and letting his wife be the one who works outside the house, he said, "I totally get you, man. I used to work an insanely demanding job when I was fresh out of college, and it just brought me no joy at all. Like, my wife really loves her career, and she's crushing it, and I'm super happy for her. But for me, my job isn't my calling. My job is my job, and I do it well. I just do it so I can afford fun stuff for the people I love. The time I spend with my wife and kids is what it's all about for me." When considering going low contact with his sister and her husband, but not his niece, and clarifying on the financial levels, he explained, "Hey, so I think this actually might be the play here because I genuinely feel like, shoot, for not picking her up, and my kids miss her. I might have an honest conversation with my sister when we both cooled off though, because she's my sister, but Nick can get fricked, and I will not tolerate this shoot again, and don't want to be taken for granted. We are better off financially than they are. Our house isn't bigger and our cars aren't fancier, but we are completely debt-free. My wife alone makes about as much as the two of them combined, and she got some really solid investments going according to her. I don't know, shoot about investments. What I make is decent, but not as much by any means. More than Barb, but less than Nick. But it basically pays for our recreation, hobbies, vacations, etc. They live in a bigger house and drive nicer cars, but they're paying off a mortgage and loans, so they can't really afford to cut back hours/childcare, which is part of how we ended up here in the first place, since I love Tracy and didn't really mind. Now for the update. All right, so I posted this yesterday and was genuinely overwhelmed by the comments, advice, and support. I'd like to thank everyone for it and feel this warrants an update. Just to clarify a few things. My dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, which came as no surprise because he smoked a lot and lived a pretty unhealthy life. So we weren't really surprised. It wasn't his first either. He was a great grandpa and a great dad before that, and right up to the end. But his death left my mom alone, and she doesn't work. My mom has MS, which is basically mostly steady, but slowly gets worse over time and flares up occasionally, and is made worse by stress, which my mom goes through now. A flare-up often means the level she gets back to isn't quite what it was before, so we mostly try to keep her stress-free. My dad had life insurance, so her house is paid for, and she had a little money, but there's also a caretaker coming over 3 times a week to clean, cook, do shopping, etc., which she can't afford, so me and my wife pay for. As I mentioned in a comment on the original post, me and my wife are doing probably better off financially than Barb and Bill. They have a fancy house and fancy cars, but they have a mortgage and loans. So, the great response I got made me think about this again, and I thought how I could stand my ground without giving up on Tracy altogether, and figured there was no perfect solution, and I had to settle on something. I took the day off work because I just needed to process and deal with this. One comment on the original post really got to me, about how someone would feel in Tracy's place, and I just can't do it to her now. I know this isn't the update some of you have wanted, but I just can't. I love her like she was one of my own, and my kids do as well, and it's not her fault. I unblocked my sister because obviously if I'm going to be interacting with her child, she needs to be able to reach me. I talked to my mom during the day, and she was distraught about having to pick Tracy up, which is pretty hard on her. I told her I was willing to do it, but I'm coming over and she's going to have to hear me out, to which she agreed. I talked to her for a long time, avoiding snark and lashing out this time, and just explaining that basically how serious Nick was or how he is doesn't matter. I used that rocking the boat analogy someone linked to in comments, and further stressed my point by saying that it shouldn't matter if I was justified or not in getting upset. I am her child, and if something upset me, it at least warrants giving me the benefit of the doubt before siding against me. And eventually, it seemed to come through. She apologized, and we hugged it out, and I think she got it. She's not a very confrontational person and generally really tries to keep the peace, and this time she went about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm not mad, but she's my mom, and she apologized. I explained to her that she shouldn't be covering for me because that means I have no leg to stand on when confronting Nick and Barb, and she was receptive to it. I texted my sister that we needed to talk, and I'll drop Tracy off at their place tonight, to which I got a stoic thumbs up. I picked Tracy up from daycare today, and she was overjoyed. She was actually a little possessive of me, staying by my side all afternoon instead of running off to play, which was cute, but also made me feel like shoot a little, because that's the impact of me not picking her up. I explained to the best of my ability that she's not in trouble, and I'm not angry with her, but I am angry with her parents, and we need to work that out. But I'll do my best to not stop picking her up anymore, which she was really happy about. I dropped her off in the evening, and once she was in bed, I sat down to talk with Barb and Nick. I told them flat out that Mom wasn't going to be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I would get up and leave, and they can find new arrangements for Tracy. Didn't mean it, but they don't need to know that. They weren't happy, but they were willing to listen, so that's progress, or at least the threat working. I explained that this was the situation now. I don't need them to mean their apology, but I sure as frick was going to need one. This was principle now. I have spent years taking care of their child, and if they wanted to be jerks, I wasn't going to do it for free. So this was how it goes now. 1. I am no longer going to be dropping her off in the morning until further notice. There was no excuse for the way Nick acted, and it needed to have some lasting impact. 2. I was no longer going to be paying for family outings and family vacations. It was a man's job to support his family, so good luck with that. The exception is Tracy, who is always welcome. Number 3. If I hear any more BS being talked about me behind my back, I was going to start charging them for my service. My plan was to dangle the thing they want, childcare, restoring it, but at the same time giving some repercussions and threat of things getting hard for them again. I also laid it on pretty thick about how I am a man, so I obviously have my pride and can't have that be disrespected, even by my own family, who I obviously love. Don't really consider Nick family, but figured he wouldn't figure that out. Nick was not happy about this, and my sister actually had to take him outside to talk it out without me. But eventually they did agree to it, and I got my, admittedly, half-hearted apology. I could probably press it further, but I didn't want to risk having to either back down or hurt Tracy again, so I took this. There were no tears and no warm hugs, but I get to walk away with what I wanted, giving them some payback without having to give up my time with Tracy. I still plan to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick and about how she sees me, but I figure I should let things calm down a bit before I do. I know this isn't the resolution some, maybe most of you wanted, but at the end of the day, I need to find a solution I can live with. And for me, this is it. We'll update if anything changes. Now for a few important comments. A commenter said, "You were paying for their family vacations? Damn." Then the original poster replied, "I thought I was paying for our family vacations. And honestly, because my wife makes more than me and is mostly the one in charge of our finances, she could be considered the one paying. since her income basically keeps us housed and fed, while my salary is the having fun fund. She was actually always very excited about this since she doesn't have much family remaining, so having Barb, Nick, and Tracy alongside her sisters always made her feel like she had a big family, and she felt this justified the expense and made her really happy. Obviously, she is now furious with them because I don't think either of us will feel comfortable paying for them again, and they probably can't afford to come along. I do hope we will still get to bring Tracy along at least. Then they added, I have no intention of ever paying for them again because there is no world in which I would feel comfortable doing so. There was a trust in their love and good intentions there that is broken now, and I don't think can ever be repaired. Just because I didn't want to take my anger out on Tracy, it doesn't mean it's gone. The apology was important as an act of them acknowledging my feelings and priorities, but obviously, I'm not going to forgive and forget based on a half-hearted apology I forced them into. I intend to keep minimal contact outside of Tracy stuff. One day in the future, I may need to have a conversation with Barb and give her another chance because she's still my sister. But even then, in terms of material support, I clearly overindulged them, and this will no longer be the case. Am I the idiot for leaving my abusive family and ignoring my mother's crocodile tears? I fled across the country from my family last December, about a week before Christmas. I left because my brother, who is a decade older than me, is a rapper, and I was his victim from the ages of 12 to 16. My parents are hardcore African Pentecostal Christians, meaning they believe in praying in tongues, being filled with the Holy Spirit, collapsing on the floor, and seeing visions. They are both pastors and own their own church. I was 17 when it all came out about what my brother had done to me. My parents' reaction was to bury everything, force me to forgive my brother, and keep the church's reputation intact. My dad said he never understood family secrets until then, and both my parents said I should never tell anyone about what happened to me. They let my brother move back into the basement and continue living with us for years. During and after all of that, I felt like I was dying inside. Living in that house felt like hell on earth, and I was struggling mentally. I went from graduating high school with a 4.1 GPA to dropping out of college with a 2.3 GPA. I stopped attending all my classes and responding to people, and it was getting really dark for me. So in December, my boyfriend and I decided that I had nothing to lose by packing a suitcase, taking my important documents, and flying across the country to live with his family. I sent my parents a super long email detailing why I left and renouncing religion. I blocked their numbers and emails, and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family for the last 8 months. Recently, I've gotten emails from my mom that I noticed while checking my spam folder, and my boyfriend has gotten voicemails from my dad. He has like 4 different numbers, and we forgot to block all of them. The emails have been making me feel extremely guilty for just up and leaving my parents. My mom tells me in all of the emails about how she cries herself to sleep every night because I was her only daughter and prays I'll come home. And despite everything, she's still the woman who sacrificed a lot to raise me for 21 years, and it hurts me to know I'm actively hurting her like this. Most people with immigrant parents know how hard it is to form an open and trusting relationship with them. And even if they didn't support me mentally and emotionally, they supported me financially for 21 years, and I feel extremely selfish about never speaking to them again. It still hurts a lot 8 months later, and I'm starting to wonder if I really did make the right choice. Edit. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for the overwhelming support. I did not think this many people would read my post or care enough to leave a comment, so thank you all so much. Secondly, I see a lot of people telling me I need to go to the police and open up a case against my brother. I did do that when I was 17. My parents begged me to stop talking to the detectives. They told me that the police were never on my side, and they were looking for reasons to put me away as well. They said my dad's reputation would be ruined, and they wouldn't have a church anymore. So I refused to talk to the detectives anymore because I didn't want to destroy my family's livelihood. I have another brother who is severely disabled, and I was really worried about how they would afford to take care of him without the church. And a few weeks later, when my brother got the call that the case was dropped, he came in the church singing and yelling his testimony that the devil sent demons to try to put my brother away, but God defeated them and he's free. He intentionally kept it pretty vague in front of the congregation. My dad promised me that he would never let my brother spend another night in the house again. A year later, they moved him back into the basement, and that's when I started spiraling. So now that I'm across the country, finding the detective to reopen the case might be difficult, but I think there's a picture of her contact cards somewhere in my Google Photos I need to dig up and give a ring. Now for a few important comments. One commenter suggested, if you ever feel like responding, you chose your daughter's rapper and our reputation over your daughter. Your tears are for yourself. You could also send a formal cease and desist letter about the contact. Even if you do nothing, remember you chose yourself. You chose to love yourself. That's what's important. They can play the victim all they want. You know they chose to protect a rapper over the victim. They chose wrong, and it's not something they can ever make up for. You don't have to hate them or love them. But remember to keep loving yourself and put yourself first. Another commenter added, you have to protect yourself first and foremost. You know you were not healthy or safe in their home. You know that they won't change their stance and that they won't protect you. That is a parent's most important job, to provide a safe and healthy environment for their child, and they failed epically when it came to you. Have they apologized? Have they admitted any fault? Have they kicked your brother out? If not, this is just them knowing how to manipulate you. You owe them nothing. They're most likely reaching out because having one of their children disappear into the night without warning has caused comments and questions in their community. It makes them look bad because most of the community would expect an adult child to move out openly and with the support of family and the wider community. You left everyone and everything, which is a massive neon sign that something wasn't right. And now they have to lie, don't they? They can't tell everyone what your brother did and what they did not do. They can't admit that they failed you. So they have to try and get you back, first by talking to you, then by manipulating you into coming back. Screw that. Block them some more. I responded. She sent about 4 emails in the time I've been gone. One when I left, one on her birthday to tell me how much she cried that I didn't even say happy birthday to her. One on my birthday to say happy birthday. And the recent one that caused me to make this post. In none of the emails does she even acknowledge any of the reasons that made me flee, nor does she apologize. My mom actually is still actively working with my brother on one of her programs for her nonprofit organization. So I highly doubt they even cared enough to kick him out. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Then another commenter said, NTA, they supported your brother and hid behind false religion. Leviticus 18, verse 7 to 18, talks about how inbreeding of any kind is not allowed. They should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. Ashamed that they made you endure staying with that pig. Ashamed when they saw you sad and failing, they did not act to help you. Ashamed that they continued ignoring your needs because the truth, they did not want to look bad in front of the congregation. Ashamed that they want you to return to that house of terror. I don't know where you live, but I hope you can get the police involved. Your brother needs to live under the jail. Don't feel bad about her crying fits. She should cry for being a bad parent. Where was she when you were attacked and when you needed them? Block the email, I replied. Funny you mention this because Leviticus 18 verse 9 is literally seared into my brain from the time I tried to show it to my brother when I was 12-13. His response was, "Who have you been talking to?" Thank you so much for your comment. I appreciate you. So, a few days before Christmas, my mother randomly showed up at my boyfriend's family's front doorstep. She traveled across the entire country to find me unannounced. I had no idea she was coming and was very blindsided by everything. She asked to speak with me, and I was really hoping that things had changed, so I agreed to listen to her. We sat on chairs in the front lawn. She asked me if I was okay, and she started telling me how happy she was to see me. She said that she and my father had been in and out of the hospital with worry and stress about me. She also said that she was sorry for the things she did not know and things that were done out of ignorance. After all of that, she asked me if I wanted to talk to my disabled brother, and I really missed him, so she called my father. He began to tell me how he was finally going to sleep for the first night since I left the house now that he got to see my face. He also repeated most of the things my mother said, almost word for word. Things like apologizing for what he didn't know was happening. He also said, "Find it in your heart to forgive us just as we have." He trailed off there, and that line was literally a wake-up call because at that point, I had been crying and feeling so guilty for what I've been putting my elderly parents through. But that line made me pause because what in the world does he possibly have to forgive me for? What did I do to him? Flee for my safety? I think my mother noticed my change in demeanor because she ended the call with him pretty soon after and asked to take me out to eat. I brought my boyfriend with us. We went to a local restaurant, and the silence during our meal was palpable, until my boyfriend went to the bathroom. My mother then began grilling me on where I work, what I am doing with my future, and if I am going back to college. She asked me if I was thinking about going back to our home state to finish college, and I told her I was not leaving with her under any circumstances. I noticed that throughout all the questions she asked me since she arrived at our doorstep, she never truly asked me how I was doing. She didn't ask if I had a bed to sleep on, food to eat, means of transportation, or even money in my bank account. I never told her that my food stamps were halted for the month of December because I missed one letter, so I have to wait for halfway through January to get a recertification appointment. She probably would have been appalled I was taking government handouts anyway. I never told her that I am working $1 above minimum wage job, that I really love, actually, to save $3,000 to pay my old university to release my transcripts. But even if she offered to help, it most likely would have had heavy strings attached. After we left the restaurant, she tried asking me for my phone number. I told her that I have a new Google Voice number after the one my father used to pay for was turned off. She was apparently under the impression that he was still paying for the phone. So she called him again, and when asked about the old phone plan, he stuttered heavily before saying that he was still paying for it and had no idea what happened. When my mother tried to tell him that he needs to investigate, he told her that she should stop worrying about that and offered to buy me a new phone plan. I declined because I did not want my parents to be able to hold anything over my head. He then went on to start lecturing me about finishing college and how whatever anybody has said about my parents is not true. He even managed to very quickly drop in "Well, you said you don't believe in God anymore, but anyways." I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reply. After getting off the phone with my father, my mother asked if I wanted to spend the night at her hotel room because she missed me so much. I also declined that, and she dropped us off at the house. A few days after she left, I received a Christmas card and a $50 gift card from her in the mail. I guess the point of my update is to ask if I am still doing the right thing. I mostly feel really guilty about my mother because she's old, she believes and does whatever my father says, and I think my father's pride about power and reputation makes him a really shitty person. I also know for a fact that they are still in contact with and working with my rapper brother, so I know that I really shouldn't give a shoot about them either. But my heart hurts, and I am really confused. I appreciate all advice. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for kicking out my deadbeat dad after he blew his money on booze and cigarettes instead of groceries? Here's the backstory. I'm 28 and got my own house now. Moved out at 18, not really by choice. My dad basically pushed me out. Our relationship's been rocky since then. He's always been a huge drinker and smoker, which caused plenty of issues back then. Fast forward, he lost his house a couple of months ago. Didn't keep up with loan payments, so he calls me up, says he needs a place to stay while he gets back on his feet. I laid out a few ground rules. Either pay rent, $400, or cover groceries, about $250 to $300, and absolutely no smoking in the house. He laughs, says, "I'm your father, I shouldn't have to pay." But I don't budge, so he reluctantly agrees to buy groceries. From the moment he moves in, it's just one problem after another. Leaves a mess everywhere, doesn't clean up, smokes inside, even though I made it clear that's a no-go, and drinks like there's no tomorrow. Then, one day I have a girl over, and he just has this meltdown over it. So I tell him, listen, if he can't respect my space, he'll have to find somewhere else to stay. Things settle for a bit, but last week he hits me with, "I don't have the money to buy groceries this month." I'm like, "Why?" He says, "Well, you eat a lot," and admits he spent all his cash on smokes and drinks. That was it for me. I was done with him acting like he owned the place, done with the flashbacks to dealing with him as a teen. I told him to pack up and leave. So, am I the idiot? I set clear boundaries. He didn't follow through. Edit. I never thought my post would garner so many reactions. I'm glad I'm not TA, and thank you all for your support. I'd like to clear out a few things. 1. No, we didn't have a formal contract when he moved in. It was oral-based. Kicking him out won't be easy, as police don't tend to offer much support to a son in relation to the father. The societal response is that a son should take care of his old parents. 2. This was one of the reasons I agreed to take him in. Like, if I could do something good for him, maybe he'd change his view about me. The feeling of being validated by my own dad after years of neglect was strong in GL. I see now how foolish it was to take him in. 3. How I'd get him out if he refuses to leave. He would go out to buy his supplies, I'd change locks the moment he leaves, and go out too. If he breaks anything, then it's cop time. Now for a few important comments. One commenter said, "NTA, his I shouldn't have to pay showed his respect for you before he even moved in. Give him a month's notice maybe, but that is as far as your charity should go." I replied, "I gave him until the first week of November. The only things he actually needs to pack are his drinks and smokes. He had stored almost everything from his house in storage." Another commenter added, "NTA, kick him out." Apparently, losing his own house wasn't consequence enough for him to realize that he needs to change some things in his life. So, as he disrespected your reasonable rules, he needs to feel the consequences by losing the place he could stay again. I responded, "I'm already painted black in front of most family members. I don't know what they're going to tell me, which they haven't already said earlier, lol." A third commenter noted, "NTA, I'm guessing at some point he's used the phrase, 'my house, my rules,' and that's a sword that cuts both ways." I confirmed, he did. He most definitely did. Now for the update. He moved out today. Sorry to disappoint y'all, but the process was surprisingly peaceful. The day of the last post, my dad told me he needed to talk. I braced myself. What he said was totally unexpected and welcome for me. He said that he couldn't bear the disrespect I've shown him, and he was never going to contact me again. His words, "You failed me as a son." I told him if he needed help in the future, he could contact me, but he must abide by some conditions. He scoffed and said he was leaving soon and didn't talk to me again. He left today. As I said earlier in the first post, he had little to pack and had most of his possessions in storage. He didn't tell me where he was going and didn't bid adieu. NGL, I was comfortable with it. A toxic part of my life was being erased. I'm feeling a different kind of freedom, which I haven't felt even after I left home. Where he goes now is none of my concern, although I would have liked to at least know where he's going. Oh well, this is the update. Maybe a bit disappointing for this sub, but I personally am very relieved how this played out. Thank you all for the advice and all the responses. This meant a lot. Now for some top comments. One commenter said, "We can only be thankful when the trash takes itself out. Grats on your newfound peace." Another advised, "Change the locks and monitor your credit history for a while. Better to be safe than sorry. Congrats, and I hope you make the list of your independence." A third commenter noted, "Actually, I'm glad that it was a peaceful exit. I'm even more glad of how you stood up for yourself and didn't fall for the okie doke he tried to hit you with. You did a lot of growing to refuse to fit back into the box of being a child in regards to dealing with him. You're an adult, and if he has a problem accepting and respecting that, then leaving was what he needed to do, and it's good that he did. Bravo.